Saturday mornings had always been Claire Mitchell's quiet ritual. A cup of coffee at the small kitchen window, sunlight crawling across the counter, and the faint hum of her husband's voice in the next room. Their house on Brookstone Lane was modest, well-lived, and full of framed smiles that looked honest enough to believe in. Evan Mitchell kissed her cheek as he grabbed his car keys. "Meeting with a client. I might be late," he said, slipping into the same polished tone he used when talking to strangers. Claire smiled, though something in his voice felt rehearsed. It wasn't the words. It was the rhythm, the slight hesitation before client, the way his eyes didn't quite meet hers. Still, she brushed the thought aside. After all, this was Evan, her husband of 9 years, the man who brought her coffee every Sunday and sent flowers on random Tuesdays. She watched him pull out of the driveway, his taillights fading into the curve of the street, before locking up and heading to the local grocery store. The day was unusually warm for early spring. Families filled the small-town parking lot, strollers, shopping bags, chatter. Claire parked near the cafe next to the grocery, planning to grab her usual latte before errands. As she stood in line, her eyes caught a flash of movement outside the window. A little boy, maybe 5 years old, running across the sidewalk chasing a red balloon. His laughter, pure, shrill, and unguarded, cut through the morning noise. Claire smiled unconsciously. Children had that effect on her. Then the boy turned. Her breath caught. The child's face, soft curls, green eyes, a dimple in the left cheek, hit her like a quiet explosion. It wasn't just a resemblance. It was Evan's face, smaller, innocent, almost mirrored. The woman chasing the boy looked to be in her early 30s, stylish in a simple floral dress, her hair tied up loosely. She caught the boy, lifted him into her arms and laughed, a picture of warmth. And then, just as Claire's heart began to calm, the boy pointed across the street. "Daddy, look," he shouted. Claire's world slowed. Across the crosswalk, Evan Mitchell, her husband, stepped out of a dark sedan, holding a paper bag. For a heartbeat, he looked right at her through the cafe glass, eyes widening as if he'd seen a ghost. Then in the span of a blink, he looked away, too quickly. He walked toward the woman and the boy with a smile stretched too wide, too tight. The woman's expression softened as she took the bag. They exchanged a few words Claire couldn't hear. But when Evan leaned down to the child and ruffled his hair, the movement was tender, natural, familiar. Claire's hand trembled as she lifted her cup. It wasn't just shock. It was the sharp, cold kind that pricked through the skin, making the air around her too heavy to breathe. Her heart pounded against her ribs. Every instinct screamed that she must have, misunderstood, that there had to be an explanation. But the scene outside didn't lie. Evan laughed. That easy, charming laugh he used at dinner parties. The woman touched his arm. The boy reached for him again. And then Evan's phone buzzed. He checked it, glanced back toward the cafe, her cafe, and his face blanched. Claire ducked slightly behind the window frame, pulse roaring in her ears. When she dared to look again, Evan was ushering the woman and child toward the car, urgency hidden behind his smile. Within moments, the sedan pulled away, leaving behind only the faint echo of laughter and the red balloon tangled in the branches above. She stood frozen, coffee untouched, watching the car disappear down the same road that led toward the east side of town, a place she knew he never mentioned visiting. For several long minutes, she stayed rooted in that spot, trying to convince herself she hadn't seen what she saw. Perhaps it was coincidence. Perhaps the resemblance was nothing but trickery of light and imagination. But deep down, something ancient and female, the quiet intuition honed by years of love, loss, and compromise, whispered the truth she didn't want to hear. That afternoon, Claire drove home in silence. The radio murmured softly, a song about trust and promises that made her throat tighten. When she parked in the driveway, Evan's car was already there. He greeted her with a smile, casual as ever. "You're back early," he said, sliding his phone into his pocket. "How was your morning?" Claire's gaze lingered on his face, the same green eyes, the same dimple. For a flicker of a second, she imagined that little boy calling him daddy again, that woman's soft hand brushing his arm. Her lips curved into a faint, practiced smile. "Fine," she replied, voice calm, almost too even. Just the usual. She set her grocery bags on the counter, her mind whirring behind the calm facade. He talked about invoices and weekend plans, but she heard none of it. Because the truth, whatever it was, had already begun to bloom like a dark flower in her chest. That night, when Evan's breathing slowed beside her, Claire stared at the ceiling, eyes open in the dark. She replayed the scene again and again. The child's laughter, the woman's smile, her husband's frozen shock. And in that still silence, a single sentence echoed through her head, steady and cold. If he's hiding something, I will find it. The next morning, sunlight poured through the kitchen blinds, golden and ordinary, the kind of light that made the world look harmless. Evan sat at the table reading his phone, a half-eaten slice of toast beside him. To anyone else, it might have looked like any other Sunday, but to Claire, everything was different now. He smiled up at her when she entered. "Morning, sweetheart. Coffee?" His tone was light, casual. There was nothing in it that betrayed guilt, nothing that could be held up and accused. That was what made it worse. Claire nodded, taking the mug he handed her. "You were out late last night." "Yeah," he said, glancing back at his phone. "Client dinner ran long. You know how it is. Small talk, networking." She stirred her coffee slowly, watching the swirl of cream. Client dinner. The same word again. Same pause before he said it. She almost asked, "Which client?" But she didn't. Instead, she smiled faintly and said, "You should rest today. You look tired." He laughed, the easy kind of laugh that once charmed her. "You sound like my mother." But she noticed something new, a faint perfume that wasn't hers. It lingered in the air when he leaned forward to kiss her temple. Not sweet like hers, sharper, citrus and smoke. After breakfast, Evan disappeared into the study, claiming to have paperwork to finish. Claire stood in the hallway for a long time, staring at the closed door. The scent still hung there. When he left later for a quick meeting, she went to the garage. His car was spotless, as usual, but in the glove compartment she found a crumpled receipt. It was for a toy store, a stuffed bear and a set of building blocks. Dated 2 days ago. Paid in cash. Her stomach turned. By the time Evan returned, she had replaced everything exactly as she'd found it. That night, over dinner, she tried again. "How's the Thompson account?" she asked casually. He blinked mid-bite. "What?" "You mentioned it last week," she said, forcing a light tone. "Did it close yet?" "Oh, yeah, we're finalizing." He nodded quickly, eyes dropping to his plate. "Probably a few more meetings." Claire smiled, but her pulse ticked faster. Evan was lying. Not poorly, but with the practiced ease of someone who'd done it before. The following afternoon, she met her friend Lena for coffee, her one safe place to exhale. Lena was loud, honest, and fiercely loyal. She had known Claire since college, since long before Evan. The moment she saw her friend's tight expression, she frowned. "You look like you haven't slept in a week. What's going on?" Claire hesitated, fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "Can I tell you something strange? Always. I think I saw Evan yesterday, with a woman and a child." Lena blinked. "A child?" Claire nodded. The boy looked just like him. Same eyes, same smile. And he called him Daddy. There was a long pause. Then Lena exhaled sharply. "Oh, Claire. I know how it sounds." Lena leaned forward. "Maybe it's a misunderstanding. You know how small this town is. People look alike. Kids pick up things they hear." But Claire shook her head slowly. "No, he saw me. And the way he reacted," her voice broke for a moment. "It wasn't confusion, it was fear." Lena reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Then find out. Don't guess. Don't let it eat you up. If something's going on, you'll know soon enough." That evening, Claire sat in her car outside their house, hands gripping the steering wheel. The sun was setting, painting the neighborhood gold. Evan's car wasn't there yet. She unlocked his phone in her mind. Not literally. He'd changed the passcode months ago. But she'd learned enough about his patterns to know he was careful, deliberate. If she wanted answers, she'd need to be the same. When he came home, she greeted him normally. She even laughed at one of his stories. But later that night, while he showered, she opened his laptop. The password was the same, Thompson84, the same client name he had mentioned. Inside his browser history were maps, routes leading to the east side of town, repeated several times a week. The addresses were blurred behind shortened links, but one caught her eye. Maple Grove Apartments. Her breath hitched. That was near the cafe where she had seen the boy. She printed the address, folded it neatly, and slipped it inside her nightstand drawer. When Evan came to bed, he kissed her forehead and turned away. His breathing soon steadied into sleep. Claire lay beside him, eyes open, mind racing. The smell of that other woman's perfume clung faintly to the pillow between them. She stared at the ceiling and whispered under her breath, so soft she barely heard it herself, "Tomorrow I'll go there." And just like that, her suspicion hardened into resolve. The next morning, the woman Evan believed to be too gentle to question him, too loyal to doubt, would begin her quiet hunt for the truth. The next morning, Claire woke with a clarity that frightened her. It was the kind of calm that comes after a storm. Steady, deliberate, and strangely quiet. Evan was already gone, his side of the bed cold, his scent faint on the pillow. She lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft hum of the house that suddenly didn't feel like hers. By 9 o'clock, she was dressed in neutral clothes, jeans, a gray cardigan, hair tied back. Not too neat, not too noticeable. She slid her phone into her pocket, her keys in her hand, and walked out the door. The morning light was pale and cold. As she drove, she replayed every detail. The little boy's face, the woman's floral dress, the address on Evan's GPS history. Each thought tightened something in her chest. She wasn't angry, not yet. Anger was loud, wild. This was quieter, more dangerous. The GPS led her to Maple Grove Apartments, a row of modest beige buildings with trimmed lawns and bright red doors. The kind of place single mothers or young families lived in. Claire parked across the street, heart hammering. She felt absurd, like some character in a movie she'd never wanted to star in. But when she saw the dark sedan pull up, Evan's sedan, all pretense of normal life vanished. He stepped out carrying 2 grocery bags. From her car, Claire could see the familiar rhythm in his walk, the same quick stride he used coming home from work. He looked comfortable. He looked at home. Then the apartment door opened. The woman from the cafe appeared, Marissa, though Claire didn't know her name yet. Her hair was loose today, sunlight catching on the auburn strands. She smiled, that soft, familiar smile Claire had once believed was hers alone. And then the little boy appeared again, barefoot, laughing, clutching a small toy truck. "Daddy!" he shouted, running into Evan's arms. The sound pierced through the car window, through her ribs, through everything. Evan knelt down, setting the bags aside to lift the boy. He kissed his hair, murmuring something that made the child giggle. Then he turned toward Marissa, pressed a kiss to her lips. Quick, unthinking, the kind of kiss people share when they've done it 1,000 times. Claire's hands shook around her phone as she raised it. The camera clicked softly. 1, 2, 3 photos. The car, the woman, the child, Evan. Proof. Her breathing came shallow. The rational part of her, the teacher, the wife, the steady woman, wanted to get out of the car and scream, to demand answers, to drag the truth into daylight. But the survivor inside her whispered, "Not yet." She watched for over an hour. Evan carried the groceries inside. The curtains shifted. A child's laughter spilled from the open window. Claire's throat burned. When he finally left, she waited until his car disappeared before stepping out. Her knees felt weak, but she crossed the street anyway, her shoes crunching softly on the gravel. The door to the apartment was slightly ajar, and a child's cartoon played from inside. She hesitated. Then she looked through the narrow slit of the door. Marissa was sitting on the couch, flipping through a photo album. On the wall behind her were pictures, Evan holding the child, Evan at a birthday party, Evan asleep on a couch with the boy curled against him. Family photos, dozens of them. Claire's breath hitched, her vision tunneling. The world tilted sideways. She turned and hurried back to her car before the sound of her heartbeat gave her away. She sat behind the wheel for a long time, staring blankly ahead until the tears finally came. Not loud, not broken, just steady, quiet tears that left salt trails down her face. After a while, she wiped them away. When she drove home, her movements were mechanical. Pull into the driveway, unlock the door, set her keys down, wash her hands, make tea, everything precise, rehearsed, like muscle memory taking over when the soul was gone. That evening, Evan returned home whistling. He hugged her from behind, his lips brushing her shoulder. "Long day," he said lightly. "Traffic was insane." Claire didn't move. Thinking we should go out this weekend," he continued, rummaging through the fridge. "Maybe that Italian place you like." She nodded faintly, her face unreadable. He turned, studying her. "You okay?" She smiled. "Just tired." He kissed her cheek and went upstairs. When she was alone, she walked to the kitchen window and stared at the dark street outside. Her reflection stared back. Same calm eyes, same gentle features. But behind them, something had shifted irreversibly. She thought of that woman, that child, the photos, and the way Evan had kissed them both like they were his real family. She pressed her palm against the cold glass and whispered, "You don't know me, Evan." "Not really, but you will." Then she turned off the kitchen light and walked up the stairs, her steps soft, deliberate, like a woman planning her next move in silence. For 3 nights, Claire barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the same looping reel. Evan's hands around the little boy, the kiss, the laughter, the photos on the wall. By morning, she'd have to remind herself to breathe, to move, to pretend. By the 4th day, the pretending became unbearable. Evan was in his usual seat at the dining table, scrolling through his phone. The smell of his cologne, that same scent she'd once found comforting, now made her stomach twist. She poured herself coffee, her fingers trembling slightly. He looked up. "You're quiet lately." She smiled without warmth. "Am I?" "Yeah." He tilted his head. "Something wrong?" There it was, the question she'd been waiting for. She set the coffee pot down carefully, then turned to him, voice calm but firm. "Where were you on Tuesday, Evan?" He blinked, just a flicker of surprise. "Tuesday?" "Yes," he chuckled. "At work, Claire. Where else would I be?" She held his gaze. "I followed you." The air thickened. Evan's smile froze, the way glass hardens before it shatters. "Excuse me?" "I followed you," she repeated, her voice steady now, the words cutting through the quiet. "To Maple Grove Apartments." He leaned back slowly, lips curling into an incredulous smirk. "Claire, what are you talking about?" "I saw you," she said. "I saw the woman, the little boy, the groceries, the pictures on the wall." Silence filled the kitchen, heavy and absolute. Then Evan laughed, a soft, dismissive sound that made her blood run cold. "You've been under a lot of stress lately," he said. "You've been imagining things again." She stared at him. "Imagining?" "Claire, come on, this is ridiculous." He stood, walking toward her with practiced calm. "You've done this before, remember? After your miscarriage, you started seeing connections where there weren't any. I told you to talk to someone." Her heart lurched. "Don't you dare use that against me." He reached out, touching her arm lightly, as if soothing a child. "You're not well, Claire. I know it feels real, but—" She yanked her arm back. "Don't gaslight me." That word, gaslight, seemed to flicker something behind his eyes. For a brief second, his mask cracked. His voice hardened. "Watch your tone." Claire stepped closer. "I have pictures, Evan, of you, of them. Do you really want to pretend?" His jaw tightened. Then suddenly he smiled again, the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Then show me." She froze. "Come on," he said, spreading his hands. "If you really think you've got something, show me your proof." Claire's pulse pounded in her ears. The photos were on her phone upstairs, but she realized, too late, that showing them now would give him the upper hand. He'd twist it, deny it, destroy it. "I don't need to prove anything to you," she said quietly. Evan sighed, shaking his head. "You're losing it, Claire. This paranoia of yours, it's not healthy. Maybe we should take some time apart. Her breath caught. Time apart? I mean it. He leaned forward, his voice soft but dangerous. You're not thinking straight. You're accusing me of having a secret family, for God's sake. He gave a hollow laugh. Do you realize how insane that sounds? She looked at him. Really looked. The man she'd shared a life with, who now stood before her, sculpting lies with surgical precision. He wasn't panicking because he didn't care if she believed him. He was confident she'd doubt herself before doubting him. That realization steadied her. Claire turned away, pouring the untouched coffee down the sink. You're right, Evan, she said finally, her tone quiet, detached. Maybe I do need a little space. He frowned. Claire, I'll stay at Lena's for a few days. Clear my head. His face flickered with surprise, the first genuine emotion she'd seen all morning. There's no need for that. She looked over her shoulder, her expression unreadable. Apparently there is. And before he could reply, she walked upstairs. Behind the locked bedroom door, she allowed herself one deep, trembling exhale. Then she opened her nightstand drawer, pulled out the folded address, and took out her phone. The photos she'd taken were still there. Grainy but unmistakable. Evan holding the child. Evan kissing the woman. Evan smiling at them both. Her hands steadied as she created a backup folder on her cloud drive. Then another encrypted. If he wanted to play mind games, she would play strategy. That night, Evan tried to act normal. He cooked dinner, talked about work, even complimented her dress. Claire responded with small nods and soft smiles, all while building her wall of quiet composure brick by brick. Later, when he kissed her goodnight, she turned her face slightly so that his lips brushed her cheek instead of her mouth. He hesitated, just a second, then said nothing. When his breathing deepened beside her, Claire lay awake again, staring into the dark. She wasn't broken, not confused, not paranoid. She was planning, because she finally understood what kind of man she was living with, and what kind of woman she would have to become to expose him. Claire didn't go to Lena's that week, at least not to stay. She needed Evan to believe she was calming down, accepting his lies, retreating into guilt. In truth, every soft smile she gave him now was a calculated disguise. She waited for him to leave for work, counted the minutes until his car disappeared, and then opened her laptop. The light from the screen painted her face pale blue as she typed one deliberate name: Evan Mitchell, Maple Grove Apartments. A flood of irrelevant results. She refined it. Evan Mitchell, alias, rental records, property leases. Still nothing. But when she tried his middle name, Evan L. Carter, something clicked. A few obscure records surfaced. Lease agreements, mail forwarding addresses, even a utilities contract, all connected to that same apartment complex, signed by E. Carter. Claire sat frozen. Her pulse drummed against her wrist. It wasn't just adultery, it was a life. She needed help. Someone who could trace what she couldn't legally access. Someone discreet. That evening, after Evan went to bed, she texted a name she hadn't thought of in years. Ryan Foster, a local journalist she'd met during a school charity drive. He'd once covered a corruption scandal that cost a mayor his seat. If anyone could find truth in shadows, it was him. Claire. Ryan, I need to talk. Confidential. Tomorrow if possible. Ryan. Serious? Claire. Serious enough to ruin a life. The next afternoon, they met at a quiet diner off Route 14. Ryan was in his 40s, wiry, intense-eyed, with that calm weariness people develop after spending too much time chasing lies. Okay, he said after she told him everything. The boy, the photos, the gaslighting. You're saying your husband has a second family and another identity? Claire nodded, sliding her phone across the table. I think he's been hiding under a false name. Carter. He's renting that apartment. I just don't know how deep it goes. Ryan leaned back, scrolling through the photos. This isn't just infidelity. If he's using another name for financial records, he's committing fraud. Fraud? Double filing, tax evasion, maybe insurance. People do this when they want to hide money, debts, or other relationships. Claire's stomach twisted. Can you find out? He met her eyes. If you really want me to. I do. Ryan's gaze softened. You understand this could blow up everything, right? Once it starts, there's no going back. Claire inhaled slowly. It already blew up. I'm just the only one still pretending it didn't. Over the next few days, Claire lived a double life of her own. By morning, she was the quiet wife, cooking, cleaning, smiling when Evan cracked a joke. By afternoon, she was feeding Ryan every detail. She could remember bank names, insurance providers, clients. 2 days later, he sent her a message. Ryan, found something, call me. Her fingers trembled as she dialed. Your husband, Ryan said, voice low and grim, has been filing taxes under 2 social security numbers. One belongs to a registered alias, Evan Carter. The second address is Maple Grove. There's also a recurring payment to a woman named Marissa Hale. She lists her occupation as homemaker. Claire's throat tightened. That's her. There's more, he continued. He listed her as an emergency contact on a separate insurance policy. There's a dependent, the child. Same birthday as your wedding anniversary. The silence between them stretched, heavy and suffocating. Claire, Ryan added softer now, he's living 2 lives. One legal, one shadowed. And he's been funneling money from your joint account into hers for at least 3 years. Her hands went cold. 3 years. She whispered it like a curse. That means this didn't just happen, Ryan said. It's systematic. Planned. Claire closed her eyes, fighting the wave of nausea. Send me everything. I'll get you copies, Ryan said. But if you plan to use this, go to a lawyer first. Don't confront him again. Promise me that. I promise, she said, though both of them knew she wouldn't. That night, Evan came home humming. He poured himself wine, asked how her day was. Good, she said softly, folding laundry. Peaceful, he smiled. See? I told you some rest would help. She looked at him, at the man she'd once trusted, who now looked like a stranger wearing her husband's face. She wondered how many times he'd stood in that other kitchen, poured wine for that other woman, used the same smile. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message from Ryan. Sent docs to your email. Check the attached PDF. Subject, dual identity evidence. She excused herself, claiming to make a call. Upstairs, under the faint hum of the ceiling fan, she opened the email. The documents were clear, damning. Tax forms, lease agreements, payment receipts. Each line screamed betrayal. Her hands clenched into fists. Her entire marriage, every moment, every touch, had been a staged performance in a man's double life. But beneath the heartbreak, something else took root. Something sharp, electric, and terrifyingly focused. For the first time since that day at the café, Claire smiled. Not because she forgave him, because she finally had enough truth to destroy him. The night of the gala was supposed to be Evan Mitchell's crowning moment. The event hall shimmered with gold chandeliers and soft jazz, filled with people who laughed too loudly and drank too quickly. Investors, colleagues, local reporters. A charity auction for underprivileged children. His idea, his stage, his spotlight. Claire watched him from across the room, her expression calm, unassuming. The perfect wife in a navy dress and pearls. The one he could always count on to smile for the camera. But beneath that stillness, her pulse beat with cold precision. Every detail had been planned. The seating chart, the guest list, the technical assistant she'd hired under Ryan's advice, the flash drive hidden in her clutch, the one containing every document, every photo, every proof of Evan's other life. It had taken weeks to arrange, but tonight she would expose the truth, not just to him, but to everyone who mattered to him. Evan was in his element, moving between guests with a practiced charm. He clasped shoulders, exchanged jokes, raised toasts. People admired his confidence, the kind that comes from believing you're untouchable. When he spotted Claire, he smiled and crossed the room to her. You look incredible, he murmured, hand brushing the small of her back. See? We made it through that rough patch. She tilted her head, lips curving into a soft smile. Yes, she said. We did. He didn't notice the slight tremor in her voice. Not fear, but anticipation. The evening unfolded smoothly. Dinner, speeches, laughter. Evan was called to the stage just before dessert. Our generous benefactor, a man of integrity and devotion. Claire almost laughed at the irony. He took the microphone, his voice steady, confident. "Tonight isn't about me," he said, smiling at the audience. "It's about giving back to the families who need us most." Families. The word made Claire's stomach twist. As applause filled the room, she glanced toward Ryan, who stood discreetly near the tech booth. Their eyes met briefly. He gave a small nod. It was time. Evan lifted his glass to toast when the screen behind him flickered. The audience murmured, assuming it was part of the presentation. Then the projector cut to a slideshow. The first image appeared. Evan at the Maple Grove apartment, smiling with Marissa. The next, him holding the boy, kissing his forehead. Then, tax documents labeled Evan Carter, lease agreements, payment transfers, 2 marriage certificates, one to Claire Mitchell, one to Marissa Hale. Gas rippled through the room. Evan froze mid-sentence, the color draining from his face. "What the—" The slideshow continued mercilessly, the images glowing large behind him. The visual dissection of a liar. Reporters raised their phones instinctively. Some guests whispered, others simply stared. Claire remained seated, hands folded in her lap, her face unreadable. Evan turned sharply toward the tech booth. "Turn that off! Now!" Ryan, blending in as a technician, met his gaze calmly. "Can't," he said evenly. "It's already mirrored on every screen." "Who did this?" Evan shouted, his voice cracking for the first time. Claire rose from her seat, every movement deliberate, elegant. "I did." The room went silent. Evan's head snapped toward her. "You?" "Yes," she said, walking toward the stage, heels clicking softly against the marble. "You once told me honesty was the foundation of our marriage. I thought tonight would be a good time to rebuild it. In public." He stepped toward her, his voice low and venomous. "You don't know what you've done." "Oh, I do," she said. "You built 2 lives. You lied to 2 families. You funded one with the other's money. And you thought no one would ever find out." People began whispering her name. Claire Mitchell, his wife, the teacher. Reporters started recording, flashes igniting like fireworks. Evan's mask cracked completely. "You're insane," he hissed. "You'll regret this." "I already have," she said simply. Behind them, another image appeared. A bank statement showing $87,000 in illegal transfers between accounts under both his names. The charity's board members stared, horrified. One whispered, "Call the police." Within minutes, 2 officers approached from the side entrance. Ryan's final arrangement. They had been briefed, waiting for the signal. "Mr. Mitchell," one said evenly, "we need to ask you a few questions regarding financial inconsistencies and identity fraud." Evan spun toward Claire, eyes wild. "You set me up." "No," she said quietly. "You did that all by yourself." As they led him away, flash bulbs popped like gunfire. The once celebrated philanthropist now looked small, cornered, stripped of charm. His voice rose above the noise, pleading, furious, panicked. But no one listened. Claire stood motionless until the doors closed behind him. The room buzzed, chaotic. Ryan approached her gently. "It's done." She exhaled slowly, her body trembling with the release of years of silence. "Is it?" He hesitated, studying her face. Pale, tearless, fierce. "For him, yes. For you, it's just beginning." Claire nodded faintly, her eyes fixed on the empty stage where her husband's empire had just crumbled. "Then I guess I'll start living my real life now." That night, alone in her car, she watched the news notification appear on her phone. Local businessman arrested for fraud and bigamy, exposed during charity gala. A single tear slipped down her cheek. Not for him, for the years she'd wasted believing his version of love. Outside, the night was quiet, clean, honest, full of space to breathe. Tomorrow she would file for divorce. Tomorrow she would reclaim her name. But tonight, Claire allowed herself one long, steady breath, the first she'd taken in years. As the last echo of her husband's lies faded into silence, 6 months later, the world looked different. The ocean stretched endlessly beyond Claire's porch, blue-gray and soft beneath the morning light. The beach cottage was small, one bedroom, a worn couch, a crooked window that let the sea breeze in. But to her it was vast, spacious in ways her old home had never been. She still woke early. Old habits die hard. She'd make tea, wrap herself in the same cream cardigan, and sit by the window with her journal open on her lap. Her handwriting, once neat and looping, had changed. The lines now slanted slightly, as if even her pen refused to pretend anymore. Outside, gulls circled lazily over the surf. Inside, a faint piano melody played from her small radio. The same song she'd once listened to on quiet Sunday mornings, back when she thought her life was safe. Now safety meant something else entirely. Evan's trial had made headlines for weeks. Local businessman convicted of bigamy and fraud, sentenced to 8 years. The footage of him leaving the courthouse in handcuffs had gone viral, his once perfect composure crumbling as reporters shouted questions. Claire hadn't watched it live. She didn't need to. She had already seen him unmasked in the moment that mattered most, not as the charming husband or the businessman, but as a frightened man whose lies had finally run out of air. She had testified briefly, voice calm, measured. The prosecutor had told her afterward, "You were remarkable." But she hadn't felt remarkable, just tired. When the judge handed down the sentence, Claire didn't smile or cry. She simply closed her eyes and let silence settle around her like clean linen.